Look at the table setting of a modern fancy dinner. You see spoons, knives, and multiple forks arranged in a precise order. It represents civilization, politeness, and hygiene. But for 99% of human history, this scene would have looked alien. In fact, if you traveled back in time just a few hundred years and used a fork, you wouldn't be admired, you would be hated. You would be mocked as a sinner, a weakling, or even a worshiper of the devil. Welcome to the Mundane Files. Today, we are conducting a deep investigation into the most controversial object in culinary history. This is the 20-minute saga of how a simple piece of metal sparked a religious war, redefined gender roles, and eventually conquered the world. To understand why the fork was so hated, we first have to understand the world before it arrived. Imagine dining in a castle in the year 1100. The banquet hall is loud, filled with the smell of roasted meat and unwashed bodies. There are no plates as we know them. Instead, people are eating off trenchers, large, flat slices of stale bread that soak up the grease and gravy. And the tools? Every man carries a knife at his belt. It is a weapon first and a utensil second. He uses it to hack off a piece of meat from the communal carcass in the center of the table. But once that meat is on his trencher, the knife is put down. To get the food into his mouth, he uses the tools God gave him, his hands. But there were rules. It wasn't a free-for-all. In the Middle Ages, etiquette books were filled with strict instructions on how to use your fingers properly. For example, it was considered polite to use only 3 fingers, the thumb, index, and middle finger, to pick up meat. Using all 5 fingers was considered peasant behavior. You had to keep your pinky finger extended and clean, supposedly to dip into spices. There were rules about not wiping your greasy hands on your hair, though wiping them on the tablecloth or a dog passing by was often acceptable. This was the world for thousands of years. From the pharaohs of Egypt to the emperors of Rome, fingers were the standard. The Romans had spoons for soups, and they had specific knives. They even had large forks in the kitchen, but these were massive tools, used only for carving meat or pulling things out of boiling water. The idea of putting a miniature pitchfork into your mouth was not just unnecessary, it was terrifying. Why terrifying? Because of the imagery. In the medieval mind, the fork resembled only one thing: the devil's pitchfork. In paintings and church murals, demons used forks to torment souls in hell. So holding one in your hand while eating? It felt like inviting evil to the dinner table. The turning point and the beginning of the scandal happened in the year 1004. The location was Venice, Italy, one of the wealthiest and most progressive cities in the world. The occasion was a royal wedding. The Doge of Venice, Giovanni Orseolo, was marrying a Greek princess from Byzantium, Theodora Anna Ducana. Theodora was not like the Venetians. She came from the east, from Constantinople, where culture was far more advanced. When the wedding feast began, the Venetian nobility dug into their food with their hands as usual, but Theodora did not. She instructed her servant to bring her a small case. Inside was a set of 2-pronged golden forks. As the room watched in stunned silence, the princess used the golden fork to delicately pierce pieces of food and lift them to her lips. She didn't get grease on her fingers. She didn't wipe her hands on the tablecloth. She ate with a precision that the Italians had never seen. You might think the guests would be impressed. They were not. They were horrified. They saw this not as hygiene, but as extreme vanity. They whispered that the food was a gift from God, and by refusing to touch God's gift with her bare skin, she was insulting the Creator. The reaction was swift and brutal. Saint Peter Damian, a powerful hermit and cardinal of the time, wrote a furious condemnation. He declared, God, in His wisdom, has provided man with natural forks, his fingers. Therefore, it is an insult to him to substitute them for metal ones. Tragically, shortly after the wedding, Princess Theodora fell ill with a degenerative disease. She died a painful death. Did the people feel sympathy? No. The priests preached from the pulpit that her death was divine justice. They claimed that her body turned to rot because she was too proud to touch her food. The message was clear: use a fork and God will strike you down. This religious fear set the progress of cutlery back by nearly 300 years. The fork disappeared from European tables, hidden away in cupboards as a forbidden object. It wasn't until the Renaissance that the fork began to creep back in, and it was for a very practical reason: pasta. By the 14th and 15th centuries, Italians had developed a love for long noodles. Have you ever tried to eat hot, slippery spaghetti with your fingers? It is messy, painful, and undignified. The Italians realized that a wooden spike, or a fork, was the perfect tool to twist the noodles. Slowly, the fork returned to Italy, but it was still a secret tool, used mainly by merchants and the wealthy, and only for pasta. It had not yet conquered meat, and it certainly hadn't conquered the rest of Europe. If religion was the first enemy of the fork, the second enemy was fragile masculinity. When the fork finally tried to cross the border from Italy into France and England in the 1600s, it faced a new kind of resistance. It wasn't seen as evil anymore, it was seen as effeminate. In the courts of England and France, men prided themselves on being warriors. Eating meat with a sharp knife was a symbol of power. It showed you weren't afraid of blood or steel. To use a delicate little fork to carry food to your mouth was seen as something only a child or a woman would do. There's a famous story about an English traveler named Thomas Coriat. In 1608, he walked across Europe and spent time in Italy. He was amazed by the fork. He wrote in his journals that the Italians were the only people who didn't grease their fingers during meals. He thought this was a brilliant advancement in hygiene. When Coriat returned to London, he started using a fork at dinner parties. He expected his friends to be impressed. Instead, they laughed at him. They called him furcifer, a Latin play on words that meant fork bearer, but was also slang for a scoundrel or a criminal. His friends would ask, "What is the matter, Thomas? Are your hands too weak to hold meat? Are you afraid of a little grease?" The playwrights of London wrote comedies mocking the fork-carrying fops. The British attitude was simple: we are Englishmen, we eat with our hands. But culture is often shifted by the powerful. In France, it was Catherine de' Medici who forced the issue. When she married King Henry II, she brought her Italian silver forks. But even under her influence, the French men struggled. There are diary entries from that time describing men at court trying to use forks and spilling food all over their beards, dropping meat onto their laps, and looking ridiculous. It took another 100 years until the mid-1700s for the fork to finally become accepted in England. And why did it finally happen? Because of two things: hygiene and fashion. As the wealthy started wearing massive, expensive lace ruffles around their wrists, they realized that dipping their hands into gravy was ruining their clothes. The fork became a tool to protect their expensive fashion. Suddenly, using a fork wasn't weak, it was wealthy. Now, let's look across the ocean to America. If Europe was slow to adopt the fork, America was practically resistant. The Pilgrims who landed in 1620 didn't bring forks. For the first century of American history, the colonists ate with spoons and knives. In fact, a dangerous habit developed in America known as knife eating. Because American knives were often broad and rounded at the end, people would scoop up peas and mashed potatoes on the blade of the knife and put it into their mouths. European travelers visiting America in the 1800s were terrified. They wrote letters home saying, "These Americans are crazy. They shovel food into their mouths with sharp blades. I'm afraid they will slit their own throats at the dinner table." It wasn't until the mid-19th century that the fork truly conquered the United States, and this was largely due to the Industrial Revolution. Before this, silverware was made of actual silver, which was expensive. But with the invention of electroplating, beautiful-looking forks could be mass-produced cheaply. Suddenly, the middle class could afford to look like royalty. But there was a design flaw. The original forks had only two straight, sharp tines. They were great for spearing meat, but terrible for scooping up peas or rice. The food would just fall through the gap. This led to the final evolution of the fork, the four-tined curve. Inventors realized that if they added a third and fourth tine and curved the fork slightly like a spoon, it could be used for both spearing and scooping. This is the design you use today. I want to leave you with one final curiosity, the zigzag method. Have you ever noticed that Americans eat differently than Europeans? In Europe, the continental style is standard. You hold the fork in your left hand and the knife in your right. You cut and you eat with the fork still in your left hand. But in America, we do the cut and switch. We hold the fork in the left hand to cut, then we put the knife down, switch the fork to the right hand, and then eat. Why? Historians believe this zigzag style is a fossilized behavior from the time when Americans didn't really use forks. They would cut meat with the knife, then put the knife down to switch to a spoon or their fingers. When the fork arrived, Americans kept the old spoon-switching muscle memory, just replacing the spoon with the fork. It is a tiny hidden piece of history that happens at every American dinner table today. So, the next time you pick up a fork to eat your dinner, pause for a second. Look at it. You are holding an object that caused scandals, killed a princess's reputation, questioned masculinity, and revolutionized how the human species feeds itself. It is ordinary, it is mundane, but its history is anything but boring. This has been the Mundane Files. Thank you for joining us on this long journey through history. If you learned something new today, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who eats with their hands. The file is closed.